So what exactly is emotional intelligence? Well, it's the ability to recognize your own emotions and those of others. It involves being able to identify these emotions, manage them, and motivate yourself while also managing and recognizing the emotions of others. In fact, studies have shown that people who've experienced either physical or emotional trauma would have more experience in dealing with negative emotions and managing them. And so today we talk to an expert who'll help us understand and build the skill set that is emotional intelligence. Happy Wednesday, guys. Welcome to Living With Us. I'm your host, Sharon Mundia. And for today's topic, we're getting into relationships, but not how you probably think we're going to get into it. I know for the past couple of weeks, we've talked about, romantic relationships, but today we're looking at it from a very holistic perspective, and we're getting into the world of emotional intelligence. If you haven't heard about it, our guest today, Mucha Mlingo, is going to break it down so that we can all learn and grow from what she has to share. But before we get into our topic, I'm going to tell you about social media, right? I'm sure by now I'm going to tell you to follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic and any other topics that you think we should touch on. Mucha Mlingo, who's sitting next to me right now, is an international keynote speaker. She's an emotional intelligence practitioner. She is a blogger. She's a lady we need to talk to, all things emotions and emotional intelligence. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
You look lovely this Wednesday.
Thank you.
Mucha, maybe you could start by breaking down what the difference is between emotional intelligence and just intelligence as we know it.
Okay, so emotional intelligence, as the name suggests, speaks to the emotions.
Okay.
So emotions are data. Everyone has those emotions. They're chemicals that course through your body. And emotional intelligence is the ability to pick up on this data, to manage it, and to navigate it. So it's understanding that your emotions are information. A lot of times we say there's good, there's bad emotions. Emotions are just data. It's information. So people who are high in emotional intelligence are individuals who are able to pick up on that information and utilize it in a way that is positive. So, one of the easiest definitions of emotional intelligence is being smart with your feelings.
Okay. Oof, I have so many questions on that. Thank you.
Yes.
Now, let's unpack that a
Yes,
little.
sure.
Being smart with your feelings.
Yes.
That means if, say for instance, someone spills coffee on you and you feel angry and aggravated because you have a new outfit.
Yes.
What does being smart with your feelings look like?
Okay, so being smart with your feelings is just about thinking through before you act. The reality is that the way our brain is wired, we have an emotional part of the brain and we have a rational part of the brain.
Okay.
Under normal circumstances, when information comes to the brain, it goes to the rational part of the brain first for processing. If you think about it, the rational part of the brain is where you think through things, right?
Yeah.
And then the rational part of the brain, engages the emotional part of the brain, which is where action and feeling comes from.
Okay.
So, if you think of it like as a diagram, a flow chart, comes into the rational part of the brain. The rational part of the brain processes and says, okay, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm feeling, this is what it means. And then it tells the emotional part of the brain, hey, we've seen a loved one, for example.
Okay.
This is a good thing. It makes us feel good. And so the emotional part of the brain reacts and smiles, and it courses chemicals through our body that make us feel good. So that's under normal circumstances.
Right.
Now, the challenge is that the brain is also wired to protect us.
Okay.
So when we're feeling under threat, the brain knows that there's no time to think about it. So what happens is we bypass the rational part of the brain and go straight to the emotional part of the brain, which is where action comes out of. So imagine, a few years ago.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
A few years ago, there were lions that were escaping from, the park.
Yeah.
So you're walking along the road and you see a lion. There's no time to think about it, right?
You run.
You just run.
Yeah.
Why? Because the brain has seen a threat and bypassed thinking and gone straight to emotion.
Okay.
Now, let's go back to spilling of coffee.
Right.
Is that a life and death situation?
No.
It isn't,
No.
right? So you need to stop the brain from bypassing the rational
Okay.
and going straight to the emotional
Okay.
and actually think about it.
Right. So how would someone who is emotionally intelligent react to that versus someone who isn't in touch with that part of their brain?
So If I start with a person who's not emotionally intelligent,
Okay,
so
yeah.
an individual who's not emotionally intelligent tends to allow their emotions to govern how they react.
Okay.
So I do things because I feel like doing them. But the reality is that that's not always the best choice.
And that's not how life works.
No.
Yeah.
So people who are emotionally intelligent realize that I can't just do something because I feel like doing it. I need to think about it as well. So
Right.
being smart with my feelings means I'm not just feeling, I am thinking and feeling.
Okay.
And when I do both, think and feel, I make optimum decisions. And that's what emotional intelligence is.
Okay.
Using both the rational and the emotional to make optimum decisions.
That feels like a lot that needs to take place in a span of seconds. Someone spills coffee and you've got like emotional, rational, think through. Where is my heart? Where is my brain? What is my mind telling me? But I think that's really what you're saying. Pause. Don't be quick to react.
It is about pausing. And here's the interesting fact, Sharon.
Yeah.
So research done, I'm an emotional intelligence practitioner with
Yes.
an organization called 6 Seconds.
Okay.
And research done by 6 Seconds finds that it takes about 6 to 10 seconds for the rational part of the brain to catch up with the emotional. That's not long, right? If
Okay.
you think about it,
Yeah.
there's been a time, I'm sure even for you, where you felt like doing something, you hold yourself back for just a few seconds, and the moment passes, right? And you
true.
feel like,
It sounds
Okay.
like you're talking about me and my daughter right now. And I'm just like, hold yourself back.
there
Relax. She
you go.
broke a lamp, but hold yourself back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so what are some of the characteristics or traits that we would be looking at in someone who has high emotional intelligence?
So, you know, again, research done by 6 Seconds shows that there's 4 key outcomes for individuals who are high in emotional intelligence.
Okay.
It manifests itself in 4 key ways. Number 1 is efficiency and effectiveness. Individuals who are high in emotional intelligence are effective and efficient. And that's talking about the ability to get things done.
Right.
Yes, the ability to get things done.
Okay, but how does that emotional part of your brain connect to your ability to get things done?
Because at the end of the day, if you think about it, we're talking about being able to use thinking and feeling to make decisions, right?
Okay.
So if I'm thinking and feeling to make decisions, I make more effective decisions.
Right.
As opposed to when I just make decisions out of how I feel.
Exactly.
Think about this across as a boss, as a leader. If I make decisions on the basis of how I feel like shouting at the team, and I'm always shouting at the team.
Yeah.
How effective are we really and truly?
Not at all.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's effectiveness and efficiency. The second
Right.
one is relationships. People who are high in emotional intelligence have an ability to develop, sustain relationships, both personal and professional.
Okay.
Again, because I'm thinking and feeling. It's
Right.
going to be easier to have good relationships
Yeah.
when you do that.
Yeah.
The other one that's interesting is that people who are high in emotional intelligence have better well-being. So it actually speaks to your health.
Right.
Your physical health, your mental health,
Right.
your emotional health,
Spiritual
your
health.
spiritual health. People who are high in emotional intelligence, it's manifest that way.
Okay.
And then the last one is quality of life. So satisfaction, being content. People who are high in emotional intelligence are, you know, have more satisfaction. It's not about saying I have everything I need, but I'm satisfied, I'm happy
Right.
with where I am.
Right. So
in
not
this journey.
complacency,
Yes,
it's being able to
exactly,
draw satisfaction.
Exactly. So yeah.
Okay, and how does one calculate? Because maybe someone right now is watching and they're like, I don't know if I meet all of those criterias. So is there a way, the way that we calculate IQ, is there a way to calculate EQ?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of assessments that are out there that you can do that will help you to determine what your emotional intelligence is. But I think the key thing with emotional intelligence is to understand that it's a skill. So it actually doesn't matter where you fall on the radar. You
Okay.
can develop.
Sharpen the skill.
Yes. It's like anything. You can learn to be more emotionally intelligent. But you know, for someone who's not sure, some quick indicators that show a tendency towards low emotional intelligence is, you know, an inability to control your behavior. So your emotions constantly take over.
You're right.
You say things and then later think, oh my gosh,
I shouldn't have
I
said
shouldn't
that.
have said that. You
Yeah.
do things, and you know, as a one-off, there's no person who gets to a point where you are you know, 100% all the time, always making the right choices. So I think as a one-off, it's fine. But if constantly you find yourself speaking without thinking, constantly acting without thinking, that's a sign of a low emotional intelligence. Another quick sign is always feeling that other people control your behavior, or other people impact your emotions, allowing others to be the ones that drive your behavior. Because people who are emotionally intelligent understand that it's all about me, and it starts with me. You will behave the way you behave, but it doesn't have to determine how I behave, right?
So there's a keen awareness of self.
Exactly, exactly. Another thing is not being able to describe how you feel. And I think this is a problem with many of us. Generally speaking, and I hope I can freely say this as Africans as well, we don't necessarily subscribe much to emotions. I know definitely, you know, if I look at my generation, very few people will say they grew up in a home where their emotions mattered.
How are you feeling? How did that make you feel?
Never, ever. That's not a conversation.
There was no conversation like that.
None whatsoever. Your feelings were irrelevant. As a matter of fact, if you even just demonstrate them on your face, you got into more trouble, right? So it's not something we've grown knowing how to do. You ask someone how they're feeling good. What does good mean? Good doesn't mean anything. How do you feel? Bad. Bad doesn't describe anything. So another sign that you are emotionally intelligent or good with your emotions is being able to identify exactly how you're feeling, right? And really pinpoint it and dig deeper. And to understand that emotions come in layers. And not just to pick up on the first feeling on the surface area. So it's going deep. But like I said, you know, for an individual who really wants to explore, there are assessments that they can do that help to determine levels of emotional intelligence. But I think for me, what I love about EQ, I call myself an EQ fanatic, is this idea that it is a skill.
And it makes it feel like it's not for someone else to have mastered, and I guess I can't do it, but it's something we can all take on.
Everybody can develop greater emotional intelligence. Now, there will be those people who naturally have some elements of EQ. Depending on the different models you use, there are different competencies that are related with EQ. But one common competency is empathy. So empathy is one of the key competencies of someone who is high in emotional intelligence.
Empathy being your ability to understand or relate to someone else's emotions.
Exactly, and put yourself in their shoes. So if you look at a group of kids playing in a playground, and one of the children falls over, there will be a child who actually goes to that child and says, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" Whereas the rest are oblivious. So that means that child has natural tendencies towards empathy, unlike the other children. But it doesn't mean the other children can't develop greater empathy.
That's what I love about what you're sharing right now, that it's something that we can all take on, but it just needs honest conversations with ourselves. Now, I want to touch on work relationships, because a lot of times I think we focus so much on the romantic ones and how do I develop it, which we will touch on, don't worry. But work relationships, I think that's somewhere where we often feel that we've got to suppress what we're feeling. So I want you to guide us. How does one, say something happens in the office, how do you still maintain emotional EQ, EQ rather, high EQ, but still be able to express yourself and how you're feeling? Because I know sometimes the office is like, that's not where you go and talk about your feelings. So how do you navigate that?
So if you allow me to just take a step back first. So we have a model that we use at 6 seconds, and that model has 3 elements to it. Number 1 is know yourself. Number 2 is choose yourself. And number 3 is give yourself. So the idea is this speaks to self-awareness, know yourself, self-regulation, choose yourself, and self-direction, give yourself. And this is the model that we then coach individuals to use in all the spheres. So in the example you give, and if I delve into the 3 elements, I think the first thing in the workplace is to really know yourself. Very many people, the challenge they have in the workplace is they've not truly understood what their triggers are. So you just find yourself feeling a certain way, but you don't know why. If you don't know why, it makes it harder for you to actually deal with the issue. So the first thing is to just truly understand what is causing you to feel that way. What are the triggers? The reality is that I may get annoyed because of something my boss has said, but it's not actually what my boss has said that's annoyed me. That's just added to the pile of other stuff.
Yeah, it's triggered something that happened at
Exactly.
home last
Exactly.
week. Right.
Exactly. So the first thing is always to know yourself, understand yourself, understand what your triggers are, understand what your emotional temperature is. You know, some of us, I always say that there are some people who wake up in the morning awake.
Right.
And there are others who wake up asleep. Right?
And it takes like till 11 a.m.,
Exactly,
10 a.m.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's good to know yourself, because if I know I wake up asleep,
Okay,
and there is maybe a person in the office who rubs me the wrong way, then I know that in the morning is not the best time to deal with them.
Right.
Because
Okay.
I'm still awake. I'm still asleep. Am I
right.
making sense?
Absolutely.
Right. So know yourself first.
Yeah.
Then the second part is choose yourself, which is about self-regulation. And really, choose yourself speaks to being intentional, doing what you mean to do, not what you feel like doing.
Okay.
And I think this is really important in the workplace.
Yeah.
You know, understanding that I need to do what I mean to do.
Right.
And not allow external influences, external individual to push me into doing something just because in that moment I feel like doing it. So again, that means you figure out how can you navigate this environment of work.
Okay.
If I can give you an example that
Right.
may help illustrate this point.
Yeah.
I hate traffic with a passion.
Okay.
I've lived in Kenya now for 10 years.
Yeah.
And traffic really stresses me. I don't mean mildly, extremely.
Okay.
And so I speak for a living. I go to organizations, I train, I coach, that kind of thing. So it's not good for me to arrive somewhere stressed, right?
Right, yeah.
Because I know myself, because I know the trigger that that traffic places on me, I minimize the amount of driving I need to do.
Right.
Right? So yesterday when I was asked if I would drive here, if I needed somewhere to park the car, I said no, because I don't drive into town.
Okay.
Ever.
Okay.
Because I know by the time I arrive here, I
It's
would
going
be
to be
really
stressful.
stressed, right?
So you try and
So
do...
I choose myself.
Yeah. Put yourself first. I hear
Yes.
you. We have to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to touch on the third part,
Yes.
which is give yourself, right?
Yes.
Give yourself, and then we'll also dive into the relationship part, the intimate relationships,
Yeah.
romantic relationships, and how are you emotionally intelligent in those situations. We'll be back in a moment. EQ is? Well, it's emotional intelligence. And our guest today, Mucha, has been telling us and explaining to us just how important it is. We were touching on emotional intelligence in the workplace, and you were giving us the 3 pillars when it comes to know yourself, choose yourself, and now give yourself.
Yes.
What is that part?
So
about?
give yourself is about having a reason why.
Okay.
It's about knowing why you do what you do.
Okay.
So again, in the workplace, when I give myself, when I'm very clear about what I'm trying to achieve, when I'm very clear about why I do what I do, it helps me to choose myself. It helps me in an instance where something has happened in the workplace. It helps me to rise above the feeling of the moment because I'm thinking of where I'm going.
Yeah.
Right? So it's this piece of self-direction.
Okay.
It's knowing that this is where I'm going and this is a minor bump along the way.
Okay.
And if I focus on where I'm going, I can navigate. I don't have to immerse in this moment.
Right.
So let's use an example in the workplace where you have a boss, for example, who is maybe not emotionally intelligent, and you are constantly seem to be butting heads with them. Then in that situation, you have to focus on why you are there and what your ultimate goal is. And that gives you the momentum, the drive, to be able to navigate these waters that you can't control.
So how would an emotionally intelligent person navigate that? How do you deal with the boss who's difficult and yells and just is a pain? How do you do that?
So I think that there's 4 key things that you would do in an environment where you're dealing with someone who's not emotionally intelligent in the office, and your boss or anyone else indeed. I think the first thing is you need to model emotional intelligence. That's the first thing. Right.
And I feel like that's probably going to piss them off even more. This person, they just always know how to act. But I hear you.
So
you carry yourself.
You have to model
dignity.
it. And what that means is you need to figure out what your outlets are. So in that moment, you may pause. You know, for people who are married, these instances happen very many times through the course of your day, maybe. Where I'm married, and maybe my husband says something, and I just think, I'm not going to say anything. If I say what I'm thinking right now, do you know what I mean? It would impact this conversation or this relationship in a negative way. So the key in a setting where you have a boss who's not emotionally intelligent is, number 1, you must model emotional intelligence. Okay. Then the second thing is find ways to talk about emotional intelligence. Okay. So when I say talk, I don't mean teach them. I'm just saying mention it. Talk about it. Find ways to bring up, and not necessarily using those phrases, right? And most people know their boss. They know what things they can say. There are some bosses where, when they're now more relaxed, you can throw something in just as a side conversation. But, oh my gosh, I was reading this article, and do you know, blah blah blah, and you just leave it there. So you talk about it. The third thing, again, depending on your situation, is you see if you can tackle it. So this is now specifically speaking to the issue. And the advice I always give is never try and deal with an issue in the moment. Most people are not receptive. So what you need to do is try and find a way to do that out of the moment when someone is more comfortable. And when you're dealing with matters related to emotion, it may seem like the wrong way to think of it, but you need to deal with them in a black and white way. Right? So you don't deal with them in an emotional way.
You're talking about emotions without emotions.
Right. So be factual about the emotions. Right. And then the honest truth in the last one is avoid or ignore. Because especially when you're talking about a boss, sometimes you're not able to tackle it because you realize that that's not going to work. Then you just have to
rise above
it and remind yourself that it's a season that will pass, and you just have to navigate it. And the key is, when you know why you're doing what you're doing, it helps you to navigate it. If you have a clear reason why.
Give yourself.
If you give yourself, yes.
Okay, now let's get into the relationship side, the intimate and romantic relationships. So say you're dating. What are some of the cues that you need to pick up on to see if someone is emotionally intelligent?
I think that when you're dating, the cues are, first of all, someone's ability to manage themselves. To not just do things because I think for me the key thing is understanding that you shouldn't just do things because you feel like doing them. And I think that is really the the overriding
Yeah.
thing to look out for.
Okay.
Is this individual someone who actually, you know, has that filter to say, okay, I feel like doing this, but it's not the most appropriate way to behave.
Right.
And I think that's one of the cues that you really need to look out for, whether that person is able to manage their emotions. Another thing is someone able to navigate their emotions, right? Because remember we said about 3 things. We said emotional intelligence is decoding the data, so knowing it's there.
Yeah.
Now that's hard for you to do, to see in someone else.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So how you see it in someone else is the second, can they manage it? And then can they navigate it?
Okay.
So managing is about saying, I feel like doing something, but I'm going to hold myself back.
Yeah.
Navigating is, I feel like this, I need to move out of this feeling.
Okay.
I need to move into a different feeling. That's navigating. So when you're dating, this is a key one to look out for.
Okay.
Is this person able to be in a funk, but come out of the funk? As opposed to being in a funk the whole day.
Right.
Because that means that they are not able to navigate those feelings.
Yeah.
Remember I said emotions are data. Emotional intelligence doesn't mean you stop feeling.
Right.
It just means you feel and you use that information.
Yeah, and you're able to separate when
Right.
it matters. So for instance, you
Right.
can get into an argument, but still go to work, do what needs to be done, you know, be with the child or whatever the case
Yes.
may be.
Yes.
I hear you.
Yes.
So can people with different EQs make it in a relationship?
Yes, because remember, emotional intelligence manifests itself in a number of competencies.
Okay.
So what you will find is that, if I give you some examples, we talked about empathy is
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Another competency is the ability to apply consequential thinking. So consequential thinking is weighing up the pros and cons. That's
Okay.
another way emotional intelligence manifests itself.
Okay.
So a person who's high in consequential thinking is able to look at a situation when they're making a decision, weigh up. If I do it like this, these are the consequences. If I do it like this, these are the consequences. Which one will I do? So
Okay.
they make decisions based on those facts, right? Another one is optimism.
Okay.
So optimism
Ah.
is a competency of emotional intelligence. Individuals who are emotionally intelligent are they are more optimistic. And what's interesting is optimism is a skill. It's not a trait.
What?
Yes.
So
it is.
cup
It is.
half full
Yes.
is a skill.
So an individual can have a predilection towards
Okay.
one or
Yeah.
the other, as
Yeah.
with any skills.
Right.
We all come with some maybe slight advantage over others on
Yeah.
different skills. So an individual who has a predilection towards the cup half full mentality can twist that around.
Okay.
Can work at having a cup half. Sorry,
Full.
the other way.
The other way around. I got it.
Yes.
The other way. Yeah.
Yes,
the other-
someone who thinks the cup is half empty,
And half empty
can
can-
actually change to
Yeah.
thinking the other way.
Right.
It's a skill. It's what I like to say is that emotional intelligence is a muscle. And the same way that you go to the gym to hone your muscles is the same thing with emotional intelligence. It's
Okay.
understanding which of these competencies are great for me, which are not so great, which ones do I work on? So your question was people with different
Yeah.
levels of EQ. Yes, because that means we have different competencies, we have different strengths, and that's really, in most relationships, people aren't the same.
Right.
I think the key is self-awareness. So it's
Yeah.
knowing what are the things that I am strong at,
Right.
what are the things I'm not so strong at, and then I can work to develop those.
And unlike the office where you have to go about it in a certain way, if someone was in a different EQ space, at least in a relationship, it's a little safer to then
Yes.
share,
Yes.
I don't know about that reaction. I feel
Yeah.
like this is how
Yeah.
we should have handled this
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
So at least it helps. But what about other relationships in the family? Say, for
Yeah.
instance, EQ with children. How
Yeah.
does it come into play and how important is it? And I know you're laughing because we were talking about it before. And I was like, EQ, children? Ooh, that's a good one. Okay.
Yes. So, I mean, what I was saying earlier is
Yeah.
that, as an emotional intelligence practitioner, I
Yeah.
find my greatest challenge is actually at home
Yeah.
with my children. Somehow we are able to put on our best hat, our best behavior, our best foot forward when we are in a work setting,
Yeah.
when we're out there with others.
Yeah.
But when you come home, you're just like, okay, I'm
Don't
home.
bug me, yeah.
So comfortable, you know.
can relax.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think that's a space where it's even more important. And, you know, particularly with children.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, I'm an EQ fanatic. And one of the things I realize is what a great thing emotional intelligence is. And if I can help my children to develop great emotional intelligence, I'm giving them a head start. And, excuse me, a key way, and you know this, and everyone knows this, is that children learn from what they see, not from what they hear.
Yeah.
So I need to demonstrate it more in the home setting. Remember we said that emotional intelligence results in more effectiveness, it results in better relationships, it results in better well-being, and it results in better quality of life. And this is in your home as well.
Right.
It's in your home as well. So it's just as important in the home as it is everywhere else.
Right.
And it's that same model, know yourself. So I'll give you a very good example in the home setting. So I get very tired because of what I do for a living. So I'm talking, probably if I'm working that particular day, I'm training maybe the whole day, or maybe I've been doing some coaching the whole day. And I realize that in the evening, I am really drained. And somehow, and I guess I'm thankful for this, when I'm actually training, coaching, I don't feel tired. I have this energy, I can go, go, go.
Yeah.
I get in the car, I'm on my way home, and suddenly it's like, oof,
deflate.
I'm exhausted. And that is the state I arrive at home. I have 2 boys. As soon as the door opens, they come barreling out. They're still at that stage where they think mommy and daddy are like the best thing ever.
Yeah.
I know that there's a time that will come where they're just
changes.
oh, you're home.
Yeah.
All right then. But yeah, we're still in that phase where they're really excited. So one of the things I realized is that in the evening, as the evening progresses, I get more irritable because I'm tired, right?
Self-awareness.
Know yourself.
Know
Exactly.
yourself.
Know yourself. So because I know myself, I choose myself. Choose yourself is about putting in place strategies. Earlier, I was talking about being stressed by traffic. So what are the strategies? I don't drive certain places. My life revolves around a very short radius. My kids go to school walking distance away. My office is practically walking distance away. Takes me about 5 minutes to get there. My church, 5 minutes away. So I do that intentionally. Choose yourself. So again, in the setting at home, choose yourself. My kids go to bed at a set time.
Okay.
And it's not negotiable.
Yeah.
Because I know that after a certain point, we are more likely to butt heads. I am more likely to raise my voice. I am more likely to end up with someone throwing themselves on the ground because of our interaction.
Okay.
So because I know myself, because I know that I can go to a certain point. So our hard stop in my house when they're in school is 8 o'clock. Right, so between 7:30 and 8 is all the bedtime routines. Okay. And they're in bed at 8. We say good night and that's it. Yeah. Because I know that after 8, oh my goodness, I'm done. I'm done, right? So that's choosing yourself. It's being intentional. Why? Give yourself. I want a good relationship with my sons. I see myself in the future having the kind of relationship where my sons and I hang out. Yeah. So I am preparing that now by maintaining a good relationship with them. Okay. Now, if we have shouting matches every other evening, that's not going to help me in my why. Right? So because I've given myself, because in my mind, I want to be intentional about building a good relationship with them, I choose myself by making them go to bed at a certain time, because I know myself and I know that after a certain point, I'm done.
You're done.
Right?
Now, you were talking about how you want your children, you can teach your children EQ. Right. And you talked about modeling as one of the ways to do it. Right. What are some other ways?
I think another thing that's really important to do with children is to teach them how to say what they feel. Okay. So good, bad, nice, those are not answers. Okay. That doesn't mean anything. Yeah. So you have to find ways to help your children learn to express how they feel. Remember I talked about how emotional intelligence has a number of competencies. Another competency of emotional intelligence is something we call emotional literacy. So emotional literacy is being able to name what you feel. And what's interesting about the way the brain is wired, somehow when we're able to name our feelings, we're better able to tame them. So we talk about this idea of naming to tame. Okay. So when a child is having an emotional breakdown, okay, what is it you're feeling? Right. Right? Why is it causing you to behave that way? And there's lots of different ways you can do that. With children, I find, I have boys and my boys are very playful. So one of the best ways I know to teach them something, if I'm not modeling, is to play games. So we play some games that help to pick up some things. One of the games I have is it's a card game, and it has faces that have different different expressions. That's the word I was looking for. That have different expressions. So one of the things I tell my kids, and they're fridge magnets, is when you feel something and you can't quite put your finger on what it is, pick one of the cards. So you'll find my son, especially my older one, will be annoyed, most probably with me. Goes, picks a card, and he just comes and he throws it at me and he runs away. I look at it and it's got like a really angry face on it. Then what the cards do is they then have words. So then I ask him, okay, so which word? So when he does that, I then say, okay, now pick a word that describes that.
Right.
And it doesn't have words like good, bad, nice. It has real words.
Feelings,
real feelings. Frustrated. You know, unhappy. Uncomfortable. Embarrassed. So that you start understanding
From
what it is you're feeling, right? So it's picking it. Then the other thing that we want to do is help them to navigate it. So yes, you're feeling angry right now. Anger is not a bad thing.
Right.
It's data. So how do we navigate out of anger to where we want to go? So the second part of that game is, okay, now go and pick the card demonstrating the emotion that you want to feel.
I feel like we all need these cards. Where did you get them, and how can we have them? I want to distribute them. You get a card. You get a card. Tell me how you're feeling.
So they're cards that we have as 6 seconds. Yes.
That's great. We have to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to go back into relationships and specifically arguments, because that's when a lot of times you'll find that EQ plays a big role in how the argument or the conflict, which direction it goes into. So we're going to be back in a moment after this break. That's Living With Us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And before we dive back into the conversation, I just want to share a quick fact with you, and that is emotions are absorbed in the body in about 6 seconds. First of all, is that how 6 seconds came about? I just found it funny that
yes.
it's 6 seconds.
And that's why they're called 6 seconds, because it's 6 seconds is a not-for-profit organization that really has a mandate to help people to live more productive lives.
But even getting back into this, I find that, and I remember hearing about this a lot, that you need to be responsible for your energy, because when you come into a space, you end up transferring or transmitting that energy around. And if we're absorbing the energy, it almost is terrifying to think that someone in a bad mood or in an angry mood or a violent or aggressive mood can transmit that.
Yes. So that's what we call emotional contagion. The reality is that emotions are contagious. So an individual can transmit their emotions and another individual can receive those emotions. So the key is that you have to be aware of that, and you have to consciously decide that you're not going to pick up on someone else's bad mood.
And leave it there.
And leave it right there. It's theirs. It's theirs
not
to keep.
Yours
it's
to carry on. Because it completely affects your day.
Yes.
Now back to relationships. I think like we were saying right before the break, conflict is something that happens in every relationship. You were talking about in a day with your husband, with your partner. You could end up butting heads quite often. So how does EQ come into play, and are there certain steps or routines that you can go through in those moments?
So everything goes back to our model. Know yourself, choose yourself, and give yourself. So in a relationship with a loved one, I think what's key is to ask yourself what you really want. At the end of the day, what do I really want? So I'm married, so in this marriage, what do I really want? And I think for me, what that does is it really starts to impact how you interact when it comes to conflict. The second thing is, for me, conflict isn't necessarily a bad thing if it is managed well, because you're different. I mean, if I think about, I'm one of 4 children. If I think of my closest sibling, my sister who comes after me, we have the same mom, same dad, and yet growing up, we had a lot of conflict. So we're the same gender, same mom, same dad, and we have very many differing opinions. Now here's this guy who has different parents, different upbringing, and he's a different gender. And men are really from Mars and women really are from Venus, right? So conflict is going to happen. It's going to happen. So be prepared for that. So the question is, give yourself, what do I really want? What is my ultimate goal? And if my ultimate goal, if I really want a healthy relationship, it actually impacts my reaction to the things that happen at the end of the day. This is what gives you the ability to just hold that thought and not necessarily say what you were thinking of saying. Because you're asking yourself, okay, what do I really want?
Oh, that must take a lot of willpower. Someone says something and your gut reaction is to say something back. And especially with people you love, actually, you often find that that's when you're quick to just say it like you mean it and just
completely. And I mean, emotional intelligence on my part does not give another party the right to abuse me. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a healthy relationship where both parties are conscious that they are working on this relationship together. So this is not a take abuse and just be quiet.
And bite your tongue.
No. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about 2 people who love each other, who respect each other, and are committed to making this relationship work. And even in that setting, we're going to differ, right? So you bite your tongue sometimes, or you say it, but it's how you say it. And it's because I'm thinking at the back of my mind, what do I really want? What's my ultimate goal? What is the end game here? If my end game is to win an argument, then unload. But then what?
It goes back to things like empathy, those key pillars that you were talking about as well.
It does. So I think for me, the thing I've learned is to really, in your mind, keep thinking, what is my ultimate goal? What do I really want? And then the other thing is to know yourself, know your triggers. Know how you tend to respond, how you tend to want to respond. And there's nothing wrong with teaching your partner what your triggers are. Right? And telling them, maybe not in that moment, but in another moment, how what they say
Yeah.
affects you and pushes your button.
Right.
Remember, we're talking about a relationship of mutual respect here. So the other person is also wanting to have a good and healthy relationship.
Yeah.
So it's having those conversations. And you see, this is what we don't do because we don't talk about emotions.
Yeah.
We don't
And
talk
maybe
about how we
sometimes
feel.
we're scared. If I tell you how this makes me feel, will you use it against me? But like you said, if it's a healthy relationship, if it's one that's guided by respect and love, then that shouldn't be an issue.
It shouldn't be. No, it shouldn't be.
Earlier you talked about men being from Mars and women from Venus. How different are men and women when it comes to their EQ scores or just emotional
so
intelligence?
I mean, people ask this a lot about, are men or are women more emotionally intelligent than others?
Yeah.
And the answer I always give is, again, we have certain competencies, emotional intelligence competencies, and you will find that maybe some competencies women are stronger in. So a good one is empathy, for example. Now, this is a generalization because there will be some men who are more empathetic than some women.
Yeah.
But generally,
Yeah.
women tend to be more empathetic. They have more empathy, generally.
Okay.
Right? So you find that specifically for that competency, you might find women score higher. But equally, there are some things that maybe men will score higher in. So when you look at the overall score, it's not the case that one gender is more emotionally intelligent than other.
Okay.
So again, like I said, emotional intelligence manifests itself in a number of competencies.
Right.
And so things like enhanced emotional literacy, optimism, empathy, consequential thinking, navigating emotions, those are just some.
Okay.
So what you may find is that women are stronger in some and men are stronger in others.
Right.
But overall, when we say, we can't really say that women are more emotionally intelligent or men are more emotionally intelligent.
Then,
and here's the thing. A lot of times you get this conversation that women are very emotional.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah.
And men don't have any emotions.
Yeah, that's not true.
That I don't believe that either.
Emotions are biological. There's no person who doesn't have emotions. It's just how we pick up on that data, right? So you may find that perhaps men are low on emotional literacy because they are not necessarily in touch with, they have never been taught how to name their feelings. So they can't name them, for example.
And often maybe it's even shunned on. Why are you feeling, why are you talking about feeling sad or scared? You're a man, you shouldn't be. That's really not how it should
And
be.
here's the thing.
Yeah.
Even when you consciously know that's not the case, I regularly find myself, I have to stop myself from telling my sons, you're a boy, don't do this.
Right.
And I am someone who's aware.
Yeah.
Yes. So even in your awareness, you still find yourself, I guess it's years of upbringing, wanting to say, hey, you're a boy, why are you crying? Boys don't cry.
That's true. Yeah. Oh, so we really need to check ourselves. Again, self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what about age? Does age play a role in how emotionally intelligent you are?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Not necessarily.
So it's not automatic. The older you are, the higher your EQ score.
No, it's not. Because if you think about it, you have some individuals who are older who never really interacted in this space, and you have some young people who are becoming aware of emotional intelligence and consciously making an effort to exercise it, so they would be more emotionally intelligent than that individual who doesn't try.
Right.
It's a skill.
Right.
Right.
So it's just about
it's really about someone being committed to being more emotionally intelligent, investing the time in learning these skills.
Okay.
And a lot of times when you're learning them, it can feel a bit weird and uncomfortable, but it's just persisting.
Okay. Now we live in the digital age. There's always, I mean, you hear me talking about follow us on social media, living with us.
Yes.
But what about the online space is changing the EQ game, and how can we demonstrate emotional intelligence online when we're constantly being bombarded by different emotions, different statements and comments, and how would you advise someone on that?
I mean, I think I'd say a number of things. Remember what we talked about, this idea that there's the emotional part of the brain and the rational part of the brain.
Okay.
And in some instances, the emotional part of the brain can override the rational. We refer to this as emotional hijacking. And that happens in the mind.
Okay.
But when it happens, it takes about 6 to 10 seconds for the rational part of the brain to, kind of re-engage and contribute towards decision making.
Okay.
So I think the first thing I always say is be the kind of person who's measured in what you do. So someone posts something on social media and you just feel like, ah! Just be
Take
measured.
a second.
Be measured.
Yeah.
And you know, I for fear of sounding like a broken record, I keep coming back to this model. And the reason why 6 Seconds developed the model is it helps to operationalize emotional intelligence. It helps to give you something, a tool that helps you to do emotional intelligence. So it's know yourself, choose yourself, give yourself. So in the choose yourself realm, that's about being intentional. And that's about taking a moment to think through, what do I want? How am I going to get there? So it's the same in the space of social media. And the challenge with social media and our digital age is that it makes you want to be really fast, and
you have to respond now.
Yes.
It's, you know, put the picture up now, respond to the comment now.
Exactly. But I think for me, the first advice I would give is don't. Just be the kind of person who's measured. Be the kind of person who's intentional. And then I think, you know, this era really requires an individual to know what they really want. To really ask yourself, what do I really want? What is my why? What is my end game? Because the challenge you have is once that thing goes up, right?
Yeah.
And it impacts what your end game is. So you're constantly having to ask yourself, you know, what is my reason why? And one of the ways, a good way to do this is to start doing things like vision boarding, start doing things like writing down, you know, what is it that you want? What are your goals? Because the more you interact with your reason why, the stronger your reason why is, the more it helps you to navigate those moments where you're thinking, oh my gosh, I want to, but you just keep reminding yourself, what's my reason why? And I think that's really important. So that's the advice I would give. But I think the main thing is just be measured and, you know, take your time and think through.
Okay. So how important is EQ compared to IQ? And when one is higher than the other, does it impact the other one? Yeah.
All right. So first thing I would say is that research shows that there's no correlation between IQ and EQ. So what that means is just because someone is high in IQ does not mean they'll be high in EQ, and vice versa. Just because someone is low in IQ doesn't mean they'll be high in EQ. One of the ways that IQ manifests itself is in studies, right? In ability to learn. And the reality is that we all know people who are really smart in terms of books, but they make very poor decisions in life, right? So high IQ, low EQ, because EQ speaks to decision making. Equally, we will all know people who weren't necessarily the smartest in school, but very successful. So maybe low IQ, high EQ. So there's no correlation. One doesn't necessarily mean a high or low IQ doesn't necessarily mean the same in EQ. Research shows that EQ is far more important than IQ.
What?
Yes. When you look at the studies, and numerous studies have been done about, you know, the impact of emotional intelligence. At L'Oreal, they changed the way they hired their sales agents, and they hired people based on EQ competencies. And that resulted in an increase in sales of over $2.5 million.
Okay.
Yes.
There you have it.
So
Okay. Wow.
It is impactful. Now here's the catch though. IQ is necessary for us to get to certain places, right? If I'm looking at a young person, I need to do well in school to get to the next step. To get to the next step. So this is not saying IQ is no longer important.
Right.
But what we're saying is that in the scheme of things, in the long term, individuals who have a high EQ are more successful. So IQ...
And in different relationships too, not just professional.
Completely. Completely. So IQ may open the doors for you. IQ may get you the job. IQ may get you the internship. IQ may get you the place at university. But EQ is what helps you to be successful in that space.
Oh, I hear you.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Man, if anything, if ever you were in doubt as to how important EQ is, I think that last statement just completely cleared everything up. And I hope that if you were watching this, that you were able to learn something about yourself, and that as difficult as it might be, it's important that we peel the layers and we get to know who we really are. And sometimes it can be daunting when you realize, actually, I'm terrible at expressing my feelings. Or maybe even something happens and I react immediately. But it's okay. It doesn't mean that you're doomed for life. Remember, like Mucha was saying, like it's all about a skill, a muscle, and you need to flex that, train that, and eventually you'll be good. You'll be good.
Yeah.
Thank you again. Remember to follow us on social media. That's Living With Us, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And be back here tomorrow, 8 a.m. because we're talking about mental health. And that's a subject that I think is coming up to the forefront of conversations. But it's important that we continue to talk about it because it impacts everyone on a daily basis. Thank you once again. And thank you again, Mucha. You've been amazing. We'll see you guys tomorrow.